These unconventional times require unconventional conversations. Listen in as your host, Richard Gordon, engages in one-on-one conversations with numerous leaders, elected officials, politicians, and others to learn what's happening in your state, on the Hill, and across America. Now, here's the host of Unconventional Times, Richard Gordon.
Welcome to Unconventional Times. I'm your host, Richard Gordon. We've had a lot going on lately, and at the same time, we've had nothing going on lately. The nothing, of course, is the government shutdown, where we have gone through 41 days with no one speaking to anyone on the other side. That seems to be changing. As of last night, 8 Democrats, mostly moderates, none of whom are running for re-election, have all decided to vote with the Republicans to end the shutdown. This obviously is very important news for millions and millions of Americans. Not only that, but literally minutes before we came on to do our show, there were 2 other major developments. One, the president, Donald Trump, has pardoned Rudy Giuliani and a number of 2020 election deniers for their actions in that. And 2, the United States Supreme Court just minutes ago has said that they will not take up an overturn to the Obergefell decision, which guaranteed same-sex marriages. So a lot of news going on. With me today are two very important guests, 2 guests who have been great friends, have been on the show before, who are political experts and have served in very high elective office. So I welcome them back. First, John Faso, Republican from upstate New York. He was a leader in the New York State Assembly for many years, the Republican nominee for governor, and a congressman from the 19th District of New York, which is upstate New York near Albany. And that also continues to be a swing district to this day. Nan Whaley, former mayor of Dayton, Ohio from 2014 to 2022. She was also the Democratic nominee for governor of Ohio. They have something in common. They both ran for governor. Sadly, for both states, they didn't win. Their states would have been better off had they. Just editorializing. She was the 79th president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And she's currently the president of the Southwest Ohio Planned Parenthood. And I should add, just recently has become the host of a podcast we all need to listen to called Carry As You Climb. And I welcome you both. Nan, I welcome you to the world of podcasting. So congratulations.
Thank you, Richard. I did start this podcast back in 2018 to 2019 and took a hiatus. So I was like back in podcasting before it was like as cool as Richard Gordon doing a podcast. So just coming back to it.
Well, thank you. And Carry As You Climb is the name of it. I hope we'll all pay attention and listen to it. Hey, John, let's start with you. Since you were a member of Congress and have been there and know what it's like, you were there for the last shutdown. You set the record back in 2018 for the longest shutdown, which has now been surpassed, a record I'm sure no one wanted to see passed. But could you just talk about shutdowns in the first place? What are they about? What were the Republicans trying to accomplish? I'd like you to talk about it from your side. Nan, I'm going to ask you in a minute to talk about it from your side as well. So, John, let's start with you.
Great to be with you and great to be with Nan as well. Look, Richard, I have a very simple attitude about shutdowns. I think they're a waste. I think they never work. And I think they have a lot of collateral damage that people don't participate or consider. And I was opposed to government shutdowns, period. And I don't care which side caused them. Republicans, you remember famously in 2013, shut down the government on the kind of the premise that they could somehow get Barack Obama to sign a bill repealing his healthcare bill. And that was absurd at the time. And similarly, the Democrat rationale for causing this shutdown, I think, was truly flawed. And it does have a lot of collateral damage. And thank goodness that we haven't had, an air disaster, for instance, caused by the air traffic control system not working properly because, folks are overworked and they're not being paid. So, you don't really accomplish very much at the end of the day. I've never seen a shutdown, and the ones we've had in the past, I've never seen one bring about what folks wanted and the stated reason why they did shut it down. So I'm just categorically against them, regardless of who starts them.
So, Dan, it looks like we're coming to the end of this one. John makes a very strong point. Let's just assume for a minute that these 8 Democrats do vote with the Republicans on the final passage of the bill, and the House does vote for it, and the president does sign it. What was accomplished?
Not much. I'd have to agree that to John's point that shutdowns never accomplish what they state their aim is, and in this case, and the Democrats, I think, rightfully did put a lot of attention around the insurance premiums, and now they're basically caving and getting nothing that was the pain for 40 days of the shutdown. And so that happens over and over again with these shutdowns. I think we're going to see even more of these, frankly, because really what they're about is about making sure that the base of whoever is upset, like that happened with the Republicans, to John's point, that they are heard. And I can speak that there is an incredible amount of frustration from the left on the ground for anybody that's inside Washington, D.C., that's making any sort of decision, both Democrat and Republican. And so I felt like the shutdown was a lot about like, we're going to stand up to Trump. And it wasn't really about what kind of action was at the end of the day. And that is unfortunate, to John's point, because as I go through TSA and the people that check me in Dayton haven't been paid for 40 days, and people are bringing food to the airport for these workers. Or as my mom heads to Kroger's on November 1st, and there's a third of the number of people, and people are taking food out of their grocery sack because they cannot afford it. That has been the cost to this shutdown to everyday Americans. And so for me, like, we waited 40 days to get absolutely nothing, and people's healthcare premiums are going up. It's another example of how everyone in DC has lost their way about what is happening on the ground in communities like Dayton and across the country.
Well, let's talk politics for a second. Who is there a price to be paid? I mean, it sounds like you both agree that shutdowns absolutely positively don't work, but still we have seen them with increasing, not just how often they increase, but how long they go on. This is the longest in history. What's the purpose here? And will there be a price to be paid on the Republican side with their base? And Nan, what do you think about on the Democratic side? I mean, there's a lot of anger out there that these 8 Democrats have crossed over.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm angry at them too. You sit 40 days, you decide to do the shutdown, you sit 40 days, you have one of the biggest wins on Tuesday that you've had, you put yourself in a position to do well, and then you go in for nothing when people have had 40 days of sacrifice for healthcare premiums. So, like, I think there's an upsetness about the timing of this. I get it, like, on the pain that it's causing everyone. I'm not saying that they're not very painful, but if you're going to go in, I think the biggest concern people had when Democrats decided like no more, and we needed to have the discussion around healthcare premiums, was that there was no exit plan. And you're seeing no exit plan today. And now I will say what's been fascinating to me, like, look, again, I don't like, I'm a self-hating Democrat. Like, I don't think we have really good strategies. Like, some days we're a very diverse party. And, if you asked everybody 40 days ago, should there be a government shutdown? Half the people said yes, and half the people said no, that were involved in politics. So what was surprising to me was Tuesday's election, when everyone squarely put it on the back of Donald Trump. And then a week later, the Democrats say, okay, we fold. Like, that is wild. Like, I don't understand the political thinking of that, when all of us on the ground have paid heavily for this government shutdown and have gotten absolutely nothing for it, to John's point.
Hey, John, do you think the Democrats will pay a price for this? And conversely, do you think the Republicans, the base, will be happy with the president for standing firm?
Well, I think, frankly, attention spans are so short today, and the media cycle is so quickly moving. I'm not so sure who will ultimately pay the price for this. I do think that the Democrats picked the wrong target, because, and however, Republicans, as is often the case with my party, anytime the Democrats yell about healthcare, a lot of Republicans just stick their head in the sand and pretend, well, maybe this will go by. And I think there was a real plausible and a very defensible argument to say, look, the healthcare premiums, the enhanced healthcare premiums, were enacted during the pandemic. And they were enacted so that no one potentially would lose their coverage during the pandemic. One of the sidelights of that is that there were a lot of people who had employer-provided health insurance. The employers looked at this and said, hey, I can just move everyone into an ACA plan, and then I don't have to provide the health insurance. So there were also, the fact is, enrollment brokers selling policies were in many cases churning people into and out of ACA plans during this period. So there are a lot of problems with this. So I think fundamentally Republicans failed to point out to people that, look, the 22 million people that are in the ACA plans, a certain number of them will be getting the enhanced premiums, but these were done during the pandemic. And last I looked, we're not running around with masks anymore. The pandemic is over. And so there should have been a more intelligent response, I think. And hopefully, look, some people are going to be hurt because these premiums are going to go up a lot higher than regular employer-provided health care, where those premiums are scheduled to go up between 6 and 7% on average nationwide. But these ACA premiums, which 22 million people are in, we're going to go up 20 to 25%, and some cases even higher, depending on what state you lived in. But there was, like so many political issues, there's very little substance, and it's just a lot of rhetoric back and forth. Republicans said incorrectly, oh, this is just to give health care to illegal immigrants. That's not the case. That was wrong. And Democrats were out there saying, oh, the sky is going to fall, trying to make everyone in the country feel that the expiration of these premium tax credits, the enhancement of them, would cause the sky to fall. Remember, 155 million people get employer-provided health insurance in this country. And those premiums going up about 6 or 7% on average, no one likes an increase, but we can talk about healthcare generally on another podcast probably. But the Republicans never clearly articulated what was a problem with what the Democrats wanted. And again, I come back to, look, the Democrats had no off-ramp here. They refused to provide the votes until yesterday to end you need 60 votes to bring something up in the Senate, and they refused to provide those votes. I think at the end of the day, we have to have a more logical discussion about this whole healthcare issue, but not in the context of shutting down the government.
Yeah, but John, look, you were a leader in the assembly. You were in the U.S. House of Representatives. There is going to be a vote in December. I think that's the deal, right?
And that's fine.
But we know what the vote's going to be.
Well,
Yeah, it's not a deal. It's like just cover. It's just bold. Like everybody knows how that vote's going to be. They didn't get anything. I would say back, like there are details that I agree that could have been explained around healthcare. But when you're looking at the cost of living right now, and you see any sort of increase around it while the egg prices still go up and your grocery basket still goes up and the cost of housing, like it is becoming too much. And so I think that's why that issue is hard for people to resonate, because all they see are costs and costs and costs.
And Nan is absolutely right. I mean, it's back to the old James Carville dictum that it's the economy, stupid. And, Trump has been in office now for about 10 months. And, people have an expectation that things are going to change and improve. And oftentimes, some of the policies, particularly on trade, where I differ with the president in much of his trade agenda, those policies can have an inflationary impact. It is, though, remarkable how little impact the trade policies have had thus far. But I think we'll see what the Supreme Court does with the president's assertion of trade authority in various areas. But at the end of the day, who gets the blame? Usually it's the guy that's in office. It's the person that's in office that takes the blame, whether it's their fault or not. I remember back in the 1992 campaign, George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton successfully campaigned on the economy. And it was all about how the economy was bad, and it turned out the recession, the mild recession we had after that first Gulf War, ended about the second quarter of 1992, but the public didn't realize it because it takes a long time for that to filter through. And so after the election, they said, oh yeah, there was no recession when they revised the data, but it didn't help George H.W. Bush because the guy who's in office is the one who's going to take the heat. And that's the risk for the Trump administration and Republicans next year.
He also didn't remember how much milk cost, as I recall. And I think that for many people thought he was that touched. John, let me ask you about the airports because you brought it up. I actually have a child sitting at an airport as we speak. The Secretary of Transportation made a calculated risk, I believe, in cutting down the number of flights, whether he did it for safety or to create a situation where so many people felt hurt and it was a great visual. What do you think about that? Do you think it was the right move? Do you think that's what really broke this and led us to where we are today?
I think the air traffic controller situation and the fact that you've got these guys not getting paid, and that likely even when the government reopens, they're not going to get paid for a few more weeks. And the
And why
TSA
is that?
agents,
Why can't we pay them? Why can't that be part of?
apparently that's just the process in terms of moving the payrolls. Now, everyone who was furloughed is going to get paid in full their back pay. And now that's the other outrageous part of a shutdown, is that you have hundreds of thousands of federal employees who are furloughed, and they're not working, they can't work. But as soon as the shutdown ends, they'll get reimbursed their back pay, even though they didn't work. And they should be. But it's another reason why these shutdowns make no sense. But I'm not an expert in terms of what Secretary Duffy said. I take him at his word that they wanted to scale back the number of flights because of the concern about safety. And God forbid that we had some kind of air disaster caused by this. That would have been just an awful situation. So I think you have to err on the side of safety more than anything else in this kind of circumstance.
Hey, Nan, you brought up the economy. This has had a tremendous effect on the economy. The last major shutdown, we lost, I think it was $11 billion in GDP. Eventually, we got some of it back, but we lose a lot. You talked about the price of eggs and the price of goods. Isn't this just going to make it worse?
I think that shutdown will make it tougher here in the country to the point, like, in Dayton, for example, lots of furloughed employees that have had to really constrict, lots of people that work for the government because of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base too. Like some of them are essential, some of them are furloughed. That's had an effect. I think overall though, the economy is not going great. The fact that we can't get Department of Labor numbers the past 2 months, it's kind of like, are we picking it up on vibes? And I can tell you that, the number of people I know that are continuing to get out of work, the constriction of people, of businesses not investing in employees is really having an effect. And I think we're going to see that a lot. It has a lot to do, you mentioned government shutdown, Richard. I think it has a lot more to do with the tariffs. That is having a big effect on this economy. The issue around in the Midwest around soybean farmers, not purchasing, the spinoff around the farming industry. You have so many inputs right now that are not going great for the economy. And really, you have a great stock market that we know is just being propped up by the tech AI bubble. So that's not real to the real work of regular people. And I think that's why you saw extreme turnout numbers on Tuesday. The win on Tuesday for the Democrats isn't what surprised me. The turnout is what surprised me across the country around those races.
Well, it was massive.
The mayor's right. I mean, turnout on the Democratic side was extraordinary. You look at the numbers in Virginia compared to 4 years ago. Jason Miyares, the Attorney General of Virginia, who I know well and who I think has done a fine job there, and his opponent had some controversies over the last month.
Had some issues and still got through. I mean, I was surprised by that. So that's how big the turnout was.
But Miyares in losing got about the same number of votes that Glenn Youngkin got in winning 4 years ago. And so Nan is absolutely right that the Democratic turnout in New Jersey and Virginia, there's one thing that Donald Trump, he probably should get a bouquet from the Democratic National Committee, because he's a very good one-man turnout machine for the Democrats sometimes. And I really think that, though, that in terms of what's the impact next year, I mean, I know I bought a dozen eggs here in my community in upstate New York recently, and it was extra large eggs, and it was $3.69 a dozen. A couple of months ago, they were close to $6 for that same purchase. So I think the issue with the avian flu and everything, it's kind of rebalanced itself a bit, and so the market is stabilized there. The one thing that I think, Democrats are counting on being able to ride this through to next November of 26. And I think the one advantage that Republicans had is going to be the fact that they passed the tax bill. Basically the extension of the current tax law is really what it was. They passed that in July. So the benefit and the predictability to investors is there. When we did the tax bill in 2017, which I voted against actually for other reasons, but that tax bill, the benefits of the predictability for investors in the tax code wasn't there, and the benefits didn't ripple through by the time the November election came around. One reason that it was really important for the House and the Senate to pass that bill in July is that it gives certainty to the marketplace. And that's truly important, that certainty. The big question mark about uncertainty are the tariffs. And the Supreme Court, I think, is probably going to toss a lot of what the president has attempted to do on the tariff front. And I think, frankly, that may be a blessing in disguise for him.
Well, it could help him with a lot of people. I know, Nan, you brought up farmers and soybeans. Look, markets are shifting. China buys a lot of those goods from American farmers, and they're shifting their markets to places like Brazil. Those markets are not coming back. You could end the tariffs tomorrow. And I don't think China suddenly goes, oh, well, fine, we'll move back and buy from Ohio farmers. They're going to continue to buy from Brazilian farmers. And I think that's going to be a major problem going forward.
Agreed.
You both brought up turnout. I looked at this. I thought it was interesting. Andrew Cuomo got more votes for mayor in losing than Eric Adams got 4 years earlier in winning. That's
Yeah.
amazing. The turnout was just gigantic.
It also shows, though, Richard, when there's truly a competitive race, as there was in the New York City mayoral race, and controversy galore. I mean, you had Cuomo, who's got more baggage than a Pullman car, as they used to say, and
Well said.
Mamdani, who has he said incredibly negative things about Jews and about Israel, etc.
And the police force.
And the police force, but people came out, and when there's a race, people show up, and I think that's the important thing. And it was almost like a presidential level turnout in New York City.
Well,
Yeah, I think New York City is like I like to think of the New Jersey and Virginia race different than the New York City race, right? Like the New York City race is a fight around the Democratic Party's future. And it's a deeper conversation that we're having on across the country in different ways, right? So the New York City race, I think, is that. The New Jersey and Virginia race is about, like John said, is about Trump. And so I think those, you can't conflate the two around it. I really think there's two different discussions going on that happened last Tuesday.
But Nan, it's interesting because maybe it isn't. And maybe New Jersey and Virginia, two extremely accomplished women, two moderates,
Right.
women who won in the 2018 Democratic landslide pretty much, rose up and ran for governor.
Right.
But they're both really moderate. And so I guess it begs the question, Nan, of what did happen on Tuesday? Do we see a movement to the left at the same time we're seeing a movement to the center in the Democratic Party?
Look, I think the Democrats are having the same reckoning in our party that the Republicans had in 2013. I think, and that is a space that we saw, frankly, the Republicans move extremely to the right. I say this over and over again as people are hand-wringing in the Democratic Party. In 2013, after Mitt Romney got beat by Barack Obama, the RNC had a big meeting. And they were going to do a diagnosis of the Republican Party. And their answer was to be nice to Latinos and have a pro-immigrant policy. And in 2016, they nominated Donald Trump. So a lot of this discussion will not be figured out until who the Democratic nominee for president is. That's part of this process. And so you can say Spanberger and Cheryl won because they were moderates. I think they won because Donald Trump is so hated. I don't think that people are saying, I like a moderate or a left in that race. I think that conversation is happening in the Democratic primary. I think we'll see more of that in these Senate races. When you look in Maine, you look in Michigan, and you look in Minnesota, you are seeing those fights. happening. And I looked at the Mamdani Cuomo fight, which was even deeper because Cuomo was such a bad candidate for the moderates. Like, I think like such a bad candidate. Like Mamdani exists because Andrew Cuomo created him. Like that is part of that discussion. So watching the 3 states Senate primaries is going to be more telling to us about where the Democratic Party is going to go in the coming into 28. That's my opinion. But I don't buy like, oh, well, it's because Spanberger and Terrell were moderate. I don't buy that. I think it's just like Trump is like so bad to the Democratic base. The Democrats have not had any way to really have people besides marching to do anything. And they've put it all in the ballot box because they know that's where they can have impact.
Well, besides the Democrats sending him a bouquet, as John suggests, it sounds like the Supreme Court may take tariffs largely off the table, right? Which would be very
Well, that would be
helpful.
good. That would be good for like America. Like,
It would be
I
good for
mean, like,
America.
so let's take the politics out of it. This is ridiculous. Like, that would be great if the Supreme Court actually did something useful. They haven't done it for a while. They did something else useful today, but that would be nice.
But the other point, John's other point, and John, I don't want to speak for you, but you've already spoken to this, is because the tax extension, people will feel it, will continue to feel it. That could help Trump too. So, Nan, I'm just going after your point about how Trump is hated. I look at his poll numbers, they're historically low. I get it. My question is going forward, for both of you, my question is going forward, if the tariffs go away, if some of these other things go away, the economy is doing better, where does this leave either of the parties?
I mean, I've always believed that William Buckley's axiom or maxim about the Republican Party, which is the Republican Party should nominate the most electable candidate who can win the general election. And our problem has been, in many instances, the primary electorate nominates someone who can't win the general election. And a question, I think, and Nan mentioned this Senate primaries up in Maine and in Michigan, et cetera. I think the Democrats will face the same problem because their base is going to want to go more left than probably is desirable for them to have a chance to win the general election. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch over the next few months. I know in New York, for instance, the Mamdani is going to really pose a question for Democrats in Albany, the governor and the legislature, because he wants an agenda which is going to dramatically raise taxes on businesses and wealthy individuals. And that is going to really cause Democrats running for the legislature. Do they want to have a primary if they don't go along with this agenda? Or do they go along with the agenda and therefore damage Democratic chances in the general election? That's really going to be the question. Both parties have this problem.
And much of what he wants to do has to be approved by the legislature. People think the mayor of New York has the power to do a lot of this, but in truth, he doesn't.
No, that's right. I mean, he needs state authorization to be able to have the corporate and personal income taxes increased or decreased. But so you need state authorization to do that. He doesn't need state authorization, though, to deal with some of his approaches on the criminal justice side. And that will be a real test as well. He would need state authorization for his so-called free buses, which I think would be a disaster. Because the buses in New York City are actually run by a state authority, the MTA. So he can't unilaterally do that either.
Nan, were you about to say?
Yeah, I would say I agree with John that there is a discussion of like definitely like inside the party. I think with the discussion, people kind of miss it a bit. It's really around the populism around fiscal issues. And so when they think liberal, they think it's like around social issues. And that's really not where the argument is inside the party. It is this argument of how much do we want to tax the rich? And that's where the difference is. And, Mamdani is certainly in like John said, heavily taxing the rich. But frankly, that's where the American people are too. And so that's what's really interesting in this conversation over and over again. And that's where you're seeing this interest that the American people are actually more socially conservative than the Democratic Party is. But the Democratic Party has already decided where they are pretty much on social issues. It is the fight over fiscal policy that people don't like to talk about because it doesn't raise the iris in people, when you talk taxes, their eyes glaze over. So it doesn't get as much discussion on podcasts, et cetera. But that's where the fight is right now. It's a fight I'm excited about as a fiscal someone that does believe that the tax policy on the rich has gotten too easy, and something I do agree with Mamdani on.
But isn't there a question on what is rich? It's in the eye of the beholder, and I find it's really an interesting thing when they try
Right.
to draw those lines.
But
There's a
Richard,
lot of people who
it's getting a lot easier now. It's getting a lot easier now because the spread is so wide. It's a lot easier than it used to be.
What is the definition of quote unquote fair share? People should pay their fair share. I hear that rhetoric about fair share, but I've never heard someone actually, a Democrat, say exactly what fair share is.
Hey, John, can I go to something? I mentioned Rudy Giuliani a little bit before. It seems we could talk about the mayor if we wish, but it seems that the Republican Party, Donald Trump, seem to like to go back to issues that seem to have been put to bed. So the 2020 election for most of us has been over for 5 years now, but he continues to bring it up. I also noticed today that there are members in the Republican Party in Congress who are claiming that Mamdani is not legal and therefore should not be mayor of the city of New York. And they're starting an investigation on his legal status.
This is the stuff John loves to talk about, I'm sure. He's like, yes, let me bring this.
Isn't it time for the podcast to be over?
Why did they do this?
Anyone questioning his legal status, I mean, that's just a fool's errand, and it's to appeal to a very small segment of the base that traffics in conspiracy theories. It reminds me of the Obama birth certificate business. So I'm not going there because I think it's ridiculous.
That's the stuff that gets talked about, though, because it's more interesting than tax policy, right? Like people want to talk about that.
Yeah,
it's craziness.
You're right. I mean, the great linguist and writer William Safire, he coined an expression, MEGO, my eyes glaze over, and that was for things that were they might be very important, but they don't get the public excited.
I have the Sapphire Dictionary up there, which is
he was a great wordsmith.
Which is a great book of all things political that people should read. Let me talk to you guys about redistricting because this is such a major issue around the country. Look, for those who don't realize, every 10 years we redistrict the country to
now. If you're in Ohio, you redistrict every 2 years. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, it seems that's where we're going, and that's where my question is going. For centuries, we have redistricted once every 10 years. Suddenly, Texas decides to do it. California passes Proposition 50, so they're going to do it. Ohio is now going to do it. New York is talking about it. Nan, what's going on?
I mean, it's a real problem around the democracy, right? Like you see these pieces of change that have like the institutional norms have moved, the fundamental supporting of institutions, the fact that we go back and forth every 2 years by who's in charge, which is a structural issue for the democracy because then nobody can really get any movement. The extremism in the parties about them getting further and further apart and not being able to really work to compromise. And now the redistricting piece. Look, I mean, it's an arms race is what it is from state to state. Ohio I'm not kidding, redistrict yet again. I think we have not had the same congressional maps for any cycle in the 2020s. Whittling away over and over again with the supermajority Republicans. You're seeing it Indiana with the discussion on whether Indiana goes, Kentucky goes, Missouri. I mean, every single state. And what's so wild to me is it was an arms race started by the Trump Republicans. It's an arms race that the Democrats will likely win as they've done the analysis because of the large states. But it's one that will be deadly to the democracy and just make people hate their government more, which that's what we need. Like, I mean, that's where we're at right now. But I actually believe that's something that there's a portion of the Trump administration is what they want. They want people to hate government by any cost, even if it means destroying the democracy. And that's what's really sad about the gerrymandering issue.
John, you were from one of the few remaining swing districts left. I think there's 35 in the country now.
Yeah, maybe 35. But I was very, very much engaged after I left Congress for about 2 years working on the case that successfully threw out the Democratic gerrymander in New York State. And I listened to the leaders of the Democrats in our state talk about gerrymandering, and it's all the Republicans doing it after back in 22, they attempted to do it. And two couple of things. One, I think that districting should only take place once every 10 years. I think we have a state constitutional provision in New York that says you can't use write districts and draw districts to benefit one party or one candidate over another party or candidate. I like that anti-gerrymandering provision. And I think largely speaking, when you're looking at the entire country, 435 House members, and you maybe have 30 or 35 competitive districts in the country in the House of Representatives, I think that's bad. I really do. And I think whichever party has the power is incentivized to gerrymander. And the Democrats tried to do it in New York. We thwarted them in the courts. Ironically, most of the judges were appointed by Democrats. But Illinois did it, and Maryland did it, and Massachusetts did it on the Democratic side. And on the Republican side, you saw Florida and Texas and some other places. So there's no virtue on either side with this thing. To me, it should be once every 10 years. It should be strictly based upon principles of community of interest and contiguity, and respecting local jurisdictions as much as you can. But obviously, we're way beyond that now. And I hope that cooler heads can ultimately prevail on this topic.
I wish that was the case. I do not see that coming. When they're talking in Indiana that there will not be a single Democratic district in Indiana, that Indianapolis will lose like any sort of congressman there. I mean, like I long for cooler heads when you're looking at it.
Well, the Indianapolis situation is interesting for another reason. It is a minority district
Right.
represented by Andre Carson, a minority, and it was represented by his mother beforehand. And they are going to eliminate the minority district in the state of Indiana, which is, I think, against the Supreme Court rulings that go back, about 50,
Well,
60 years.
that's been eaten away through the Voting Rights Act. I mean, that will go to the Supreme Court. It'll be interesting to see what the Supreme Court says, particularly around the voting rights issue, because they've like whittled that away.
And the Supreme Court right now has the Louisiana case before them.
Right.
And I think they're going to toss the racially gerrymandered district that they created in Louisiana, which is like a 200-mile long submarine that goes from Baton Rouge to Shreveport. And I think that what John Roberts said in a decision probably a decade ago, which was, when are we going to get out of this sordid business of dividing up people by race? I think that's likely to happen. And that is also going to open up a number of issues about some of the minority districts that were created in response to that Voting Rights Act. So we'll see how that unfolds as well.
Well, and to that point, frustration by the Louisiana district being 200 miles, Indianapolis, one city, right? One community represented by a minority, Andre Carson, split up to actually make it less representative of that city. So it goes the whole other way with that Louisiana case that has these consequences in urban communities across the Midwest. That is a real problem, because of this issue that we have where the heat is so hot on gerrymandering. And that's what's really sad. I mean, to imagine the state of Indiana, the state of Kentucky not having a single Democrat in those states is pretty wild. And that could happen down the pike because of that Louisiana case.
Like Massachusetts.
I'm sorry, John?
Massachusetts the other way.
Yeah. Said it's kind of like Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Would either of you support a binding nonpartisan panel doing it, taking the power away from the governor? And we just saw that overturned in California.
It's such a mess. We tried to get gerrymandering through in 2018 in Ohio, passed a bill. Some Democrats didn't support it because they said the Republicans would bastardize it, and that's what they've done. So, I think the best laws on the books are the New York laws that were able to be held, and the Michigan law. Those are the two laws I think that are the strongest, that actually do hold for real conversation. They'll have more competitive districts. That makes their democracy stronger. Always better when these elections are fought in general elections than primaries. Over and over again, we see that in state house races. It makes our state house better when there's general election fights rather than primary fights, and it's the same in the Congress. So Yeah, I mean, I would love it if we could have like more like New York and Michigan's law. I think it would be much more fair across the country. But, states' rights, man, it's pretty wild.
You guys have been very generous with your time. Let me ask you a very quick question for each of you. Same question. Can a Republican win the governorship in New York? Can a Democrat win the governorship in Ohio? John, you both ran, so you know better than anybody.
Yes, in 2026, a Republican, Elise Stefanik, can get elected governor of New York.
And
Nan?
yes, Amy Acton can win in governor in Ohio in 2026 against the billionaire Vivek Ramaswamy. She can take that. So.
Okay, we're going to have to come back and have that discussion. But listen, both of you have been great, very generous with your time, not just today, but throughout. I appreciate it. Everybody, listen to Nan's podcast. I recommend it to you. So please do that. I appreciate you both joining me in Unconventional Times today. And remember, I know I don't have to tell you this because you know it, stay unconventional. So thank you both. So
Thank you.
let me just conclude this week's discussion by saying this. This week, we also saw the departure of two political giants from the last 50 years. Nancy Pelosi announced that she was not running for re-election, and Dick Cheney sadly passed away. Both were controversial in their own way, but both stood up for what they believed in. Whether you like her or not, Speaker Pelosi, who John, I think, served with, was one of the most accomplished and consequential speakers in American history. She was the force behind much of the major legislation that has passed in the last 20 years. Though through will and I guess force of her personality, she's able to get a very fractious Democratic caucus together. And she also showed us that giving up power is sometimes as important as keeping it and using it. Dick Cheney served his country as a congressman, the youngest chief of staff to the President of the United States, Secretary of Defense, and Vice President of the United States. Most historians believe he was the most powerful vice president in American history. A lifelong Republican, he chose country over party in refusing to support Donald Trump after the January 6th attempt to overthrow the 2020 elections. It took courage and strength for him to do that, something that we all know he passed on to his daughter Liz. They were great public servants in their own way and deserve our respect and our thanks for their service. So this is Unconventional Times. Remember to listen to us wherever you get your podcasts and watch us on YouTube. It's YouTube at UT-Richard Gordon, YouTube at the letters UT-Richard Gordon. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you real soon. And remember, till then, stay unconventional. Thanks for watching.
You've been listening to Unconventional Times with your host, Richard Gordon. Check out all of the episodes of Unconventional Times on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Richard Gordon and all of his unconventional conversations, head on over to unconventionaltimes.com. Thanks for listening.